Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hallo internet, ek is weer opgewonde want ek praat Afrikaans, maar ek dink ons gaan 'n bietjie Engels ook praat later. En ek het 'n gas hierso van die artillerie, ouens, die gunners, en is 'n man waarvoor ek nou regtig uitsien om mee te praat, kolonel Tenis J. Coetzee. Hy was op 'n stadium 'n bevelvoerder daar by die artillerie skool, ek dink is in Potchefstroom, maar hy sal ons meer vertel van sy loopbaan. Hy is ook 'n man wat vir dieselfde maatskappy gewerk het vir lang tyd, baie langer as ek, as waar ek gewerk het in Nigeria, G4S, of miskien was dit op daai stadium voordat G4S geword het. Maar in elk geval, is baie welkom hier, ek is baie dankbaar vir die tyd en moeite, en ek sien uit na ons gesprek. Ek wonder, kolonel, kan jy ons net 'n klein agtergrondjie van jouself gee, dat ons net weet met wie ons praat, en dan kan ons die aanbieding doen oor die artillerie. En laastens wil ek net vir generaal Koos Bom en kolonel Perry bedank dat hulle vir kolonel Coetzee hier aangebring het by ons.
Baie dankie Koos vir die geleentheid. Ek is nogal verbaas toe jy my gekontak het, of Peer aanvanklik my gekontak het. Maar ek is 'n afgetrede lid, bly hier lekker in Monte Cristo in die noordooste van Hartenbos. En ek het my militêre loopbaan na so 'n bietjie studies in 1977 begin, dwarsdeur tot 1998 toe ek as bevelvoerder van die artillerie skool besluit het om 'n tweede loopbaan te vat. Ek is getroud met my vrou van nou amper 50 jaar. Ek het 2 meisiekinders. Hulle is ook al in die 40 en my oudste meisiekind en haar man, my skoonseun, werk in Abu Dhabi vir 'n hele paar jaar nou al, en my jongste dogter met die kleinkinders bly in Appington, en daai een se skoonseun werk in Saudi-Arabië nou al vir 6 jaar. So ons is baie gelukkig hier, en ek is bevoorreg dat julle my genooi het, en ek moet ook sê dat dis so baie jare terug wat ek in die weermag was, dat ek moes nou regtig gaan grou om 'n paar goeders in die hande te kry. 15 jaar in die buiteland, soos Koos genoem het, en kom ons kyk hoe gaan dit. Baie dankie nogmaals. Goed, nogmaals baie dankie. Ek gaan die toespraak of die gepraatjie in Afrikaans en in Engels doen, net so om dit makliker te maak, miskien vir 'n paar mense. Ek gaan eerstens an overview of my military and civilian career. I'm a retired Colonel T.J. Coetzee with an HC medal, SM and an MMM medal. Then after that, I'm going to talk about what happened at the School of Artillery, and then there's just a small closure. Ek was so lank uit sirkulasie uit, veral met die laaste 15 jaar in die buiteland, dat ek nie alles in my loopbaan in die artillerie kan onthou nie, maar ek sal tog poog om dit so akkuraat as moontlik weer te gee. Aanvanklik na studies en 2 jaar by die outeursfirma, klim ek op die trein op die 5de Januarie 1977 na Potchefstroom om my diensplig daar by 4 artillerie regiment te doen. Ek gaan na 4-1 battery toe, wat ek ook later diens gedoen het, met 'n baie bekende artillerist, meneer Whitey de Tooy as die batterybevelvoerder. Hy werk, hy bly tans afgetrede in Amerika. Ek kan nou nie die naam van die BSM onthou nie, maar die stafsergeant was ook 'n legende van die Tweede Wêreldoorlog, ou stafsergeant Dada Uys, hy was die BSKM. Na die basiese opleiding is ek gekeur en ek doen leiergroep by die artillerie skool. Anders as die res van die mense wat dadelik met hulle artillerie opleiding begin, word ek en nog 3 ander KO's gekeur om infanterieskool toe te gaan, om die tuinopleiding te gaan doen. Dit was ter voorbereiding om daarna by die artillerie skool te bly en daardie tipe van opleiding aan te bied. Na die infanterieopleiding keer ek terug na die artillerie skool toe en dit gaan dan voort met my artillerieopleiding. Ek is baie trots, en jy sal sien op die foto op die regterkant, dat ek in die einde van daardie jaar die trofee, of dan die sabel, of die swaard, noem het wat jy wil, was die beste KO jong offisier ontvanger van 1977. Ek was verder bevoorreg dat die eertydse eerste minister, Hendrik Verwoerd, se vrou, Tannie Betsy Verwoerd, hierdie trofee aan my oorhandig het, voorwaar 'n voorreg. Aan die einde van 78 gaan ek na 4 artillerie regiment toe, met generaal Koos Loupsher as die bevelvoerder, Jakob van Heerden as die 2B, Willie Viljoen is die adjudant, en my batterybevelvoerder is Major Jaap Nel. Nou Jaap bly so 100 meter hier van my af, van dieselfde estate wat ek bly. Daardie lede was eintlik die eerste keer wat ek nou met senior offisiere te doen gekry het, en dit vir ons goed gas gegee, maar dit was baie aangenaam ook. Ek en Jaap doen toe later valskermkursus saam in 1980 en ons verwerk ons valskermvlekkies en regs kan jy nou die jonger mense sien. Regs Jaap, ek sit in die middel en Piet Botha wat ook al die pad saam met ons gegaan het en later ook in my loopbaan vir my gewerk het aan die linkerkant. Ek neem ook deel aan Operasie Protea as 'n voor saam met kolonel Eggie Viljoen, wat daai tyd ek het voorgestap saam met hom en sy groep by 3 bataljon. En ongelukkig het daar 140 mm ronde tussen ons geval en as 'n hele klompie mense oorlede. Gelukkig, dankie Vader, ek was nie hier voor van daardie bestoking nie. Maar dit gebeur. Hoe sê hulle, you can't make an omelet without breaking any eggs. So, ek het ook deelgeneem daarna aan Ops Daisy as 'n voor en later as 'n troebef. Ek dien ook as batterybevelvoerder op Katimomlevo by die Noua basis. So ja, ek het in beginjare het ek maar redelik rondgespring en toe aan einde van 84 toe gaan ek na artillerieskool toe en ek sluit aan by skietkunstleel met Jakes Jacobs en Duff de Villiers as my mentors. Dit was nogal 'n uitdaging, maar dit was verskriklik lekker aan die einde van die dag. In September 1985, tydens so operasie noord van Ngongo, word ek ernstig gewond. 'n veranderlike innerlaag met die genade van die Here oorleef ek en Leon Philipson en kolonel Victor Viljoen, soos julle hom ken, reël die Keiserwerk en vir dit is ek bevoorreg om die honoris crucis te ontvang. Ek voltooi my kanonbosoffisier, troebef, batterybevelvoerder, vegspan en veggroep kursusse teen 1987 en toe word ek aangestel as die hoofinstrukteur skietkuns by die artillerieskool en ek is nie seker van of dit 1987 is nie, ek dink dit is 1987. Goed, so daarna het ek deelgeneem aan Ops Hooper in 1987, ek is toe die vuursteen koördineringsoffisier en Jakes Jacobs was die artilleriebef. Ongelukkig brand ek baie erg met 'n ladings wat ontplof langs my en ek word afgevoer na 'n militêre hospitaal, maar wat, hier sit ek vandag spekvet en gesond. Na voltooiing van die stafkursus word ek die 2B by die artillerieskool. Op daardie stadium was Martin Skalakamp die bevelvoerder en Jakes Jacob was die direkteur artillerie. Ek word daarna aangestel in die middel 1995 as die bevelvoerder van die artillerieskool, waarop ek baie trots was en is, en tot en by die einde van 1998 waarna ek die mag verlaat. Nou wat het ek gedoen daarna? Daarna het ek 'n loopbaan van genade. Dis hoe ek dit kan beskryf. Ek word begin 2002 aangestel as die direkteur operasies in die VAE, Verenigde Arabiese Emirate, vir die wat nie weet nie. En ek werk toe vir die voormalige Groep 4 Valk. Daarna het hulle toe geword Groep 4 en toe Groep 4 Securitor en toe G4S en ek weet net seker nou 'n nuwe naam. Ek beklee die volgende poste in NAMISA. NAMISA vriende staan vir Northern Africa, Middle East and Asia. I've been the director operations in the UAE 2002 till 2004. After that, I became the managing director in the Republic of Yemen 2005 and 2006. That was fun. That was at the time when the Houthis came down and tried to take over the capital, Salah. So that was quite fun. After that, I moved back to the UAE and became the managing director from 2007 to 2010, looking after various sectors of the business. After that, I was moved to Sri Lanka to try to solve some issues there, and also to Mauritius, sort of a double posting till the end of 2010. I don't know why they always sent me to places where there was a challenge. And one day we had a conference in Vietnam, and then the CEO of the group was Nick Buckles, and he introduced me as Mr. Fix. So I was always sent to the places where there was a bit of a challenge, And that's why I ended up in places like Yemen and Saudi and all those type of places. I went to Egypt then in 2011 and 2012. That was also fun because that was the time the Muslim Brotherhood took over. And we had to basically lay low and just carry on with the business. Daarna was my laaste pos in die buiteland, by die groep. Daarna het ek 'n pos gekry in Saudi, waar ek 'n dubbelhoed aanstelling gehad het met 'n maatskappy met die naam van Al Majal Pty Limited. Baie groot maatskappy met 'n jaarlikse turnover van amper $1 biljoen. Goed, toe keer ek terug na Suid-Afrika in 2016 en glo dit nou as julle wil, dis nou al 10 jaar. En ek tree af toe in Hermanus. Daarna word ek deur 'n internasionale logistiese maatskappy Ava Global aangestel as direkteur risikobestuur en ek keer ook in daardie tyd terug na Saudi-Arabië om vir Ava 'n groot bank, 'n multibank cash center te bou en te bestuur. In die middel van die woestyn, in 'n plek met die naam van Al Hoef. Ek verlaat die koöperatiewe omgewing in einde 2018. En ek stig toe 'n maatskappy, ek en 'n vriend wat ons noem Riska Solution. Riska Solution konsentreer op sekuriteit en veiligheid en batebestuur verwante sake. En ons het toe betrokke geraak in Afrika, ook vir Ava Global, waar ons due diligence vir hulle gaan doen het, in verskillende lande, met die oog op maatskappye wat hulle wil oorneem of koop, of merge. En ons het ook 'n klomp risikobestuurwerk in Suid-Afrika gedoen. En ek het myself daarna besig gehou met risikoverwante konsultasie hier in hierdie omgewing, soos byvoorbeeld het ek een van die groot malls se risikobestuurplanne vir hulle gaan skryf ensovoorts. Ek word ek verhuis in 2022, soos ek gesê het, hier na Monte Cristo waar ek nou bly, in Noordoos van Hartenbos. Ek het in 2024 stel hulle my aan as tesourie by ons kerk, dien ook sedertdien op die kerkraad. En ek het ook vir 2 jaar gedien op die bestuur van die landgoed. Nou, dis genoeg nou oor my ander loopbaan. Let's talk about the School of Artillery. I would like to start off by saying it was absolutely a privilege to work at the School of Artillery. It's a great unit, and I'm very proud to say that if you look at the board in the entrance hall, and you look at the previous commanders, if you can put your name with people like Constant Viljoen, Frans van der Berg, Paul Lombard, Koos Loubser, etc., it's indeed a privilege. Now, I had a certain approach as a commander, and this approach, I'm going to try to explain it to you very shortly. I had a no tolerance approach. Discipline was very important, and I enforced discipline. I believe in loyalty to the unit, the commanders, and the students through troops. It was a high priority. So loyalty, you cannot manage a unit if you don't have up and downwards loyalty. I focused on practical exercises. We participated yearly in large exercises at the Army Battle School. And for example, I changed the Battery Commander's course evaluation process to 30% theory, 50% practicals, that's more the appreciation and plans, and 25%, 25% for theory, 50% for the practical evaluation, and then 25% for the performance during field exercises. Just a different approach. Practical, focus more on practical than on the theory. Neatness of the unit, the living quarters, everything is important. That's part of discipline. If you allow a unit to look like a scrapyard, you're in for trouble. Then I tried to accommodate the newly integrated forces. It was a difficult challenge. I think the main reason why I found it a bit of a challenge is I failed some of the students and I refused to pass them. And that landed me a bit in hot water sometimes, but I stick to my principles. And I must say, I had a great British military advisory team, Lieutenant Colonel Hugh Lawford with me, and he supported us all the way. I also realized early in my time as the commander that you must have good cooperation and good relationships with the community and, of course, the Arms Corps affiliates. Here I'm referring to things like golf days, open days, etc. It is very, very important because you cannot function without the support of the community and your Arms Corps friends. I believed in joint planning exercises at the end of the training of the senior military officers, and we had a bit of wargaming, etc., etc. I must say everything was performance-driven, with no excuses for underperformance, and unfortunately that gave me the nickname of the White Lion, which I still have. If the guys in Potchefstroom see me or talk to me, they always ask me, how's the White Lion going? So that's something of the past, but that's the nickname I got because I believe in performance. And I also would like to say that we work hard, but we also play hard. And at the bottom is a quote that I always believe, even not only while I was at the School of Artillery, but also in my career after that. You must have a good team with you. Teamwork is everything. And you can't fly like an eagle if you're surrounded by turkeys. That landed me in hot water, by the way, in G4S, because I mentioned that one time at the meeting, and that didn't go off very well. But I always believe that, and I always try to get a good team around me. Now, the achievements at the School of Artillery, very proud of these achievements, and it's with the team, it's not me only. We won the best unit in Northwestern Command in 2005, 2006, and 2007. We won the inter-unit rugby and golf trophies, so we also participated in the sport from 2005 to 2008. We were the best or top artillery participating unit at the combined exercises in Army Battle School in the years as mentioned there. I want to say something about that. The last exercise in 2008, we didn't have the money in the budget for fuel and for rations and enough ammunition to actually participate in this exercise. I had a phone call with the commander of the Army Battle School, Theo Beileveld, great friend of mine who lived very close to me after my military career. And he allowed us to use the ammunition, rations, etc. from the Army Battle School. That enabled us to participate in that exercise. If it wasn't for that, we would have skipped 2008. And I also was the Vice President of the South African Defence Force Rugby on the board from 2005 to 2008. And we took the Northwestern Command Defence Force Rugby team to a rugby tour in England and Wales in 1996. And at the School of Artillery, we built a clubhouse or a guest house for imported visitors or senior officers. I tried to establish and maintain a spirit of hardworking, loyalty, and performance. Now, a little bit more about the School of Artillery, and this is not specifically the time that I was in commander, but I would like to take you through a few interesting incidents or happenings. Ons het die gewoonte gehad om op die doelwit te slaap. Die aand voor die finale vuurplan geskiet word tydens 'n oefening. It's a bit risky. All the senior officers get together, we sleep on the objectives, and early that morning when the fire plan starts, we better be off the target. So that was something that is always nice. We came there together, we were very tired, very dirty after the exercises. Ons het 'n lekker vleisie gebraai, ietsie gedrink, en sommer net gepraat oor al die goeie dinge wat gebeur het deur die oefening, en dan het ons natuurlik betyds wel opgestaan om te gee pad voordat hulle begin skiet daar op die teiken. Jongen, nie so, ek het net by die artillerie skool aangekom, toe ek en Odeon Holtshausen, hy het afgetree as 'n generaal. Dus ons twee daar met 'n veldoefening in die artillerie skool besig, en generaal Koos Bom, gee vir my 'n nuwe Land Rover om mee te ry, en ek en Deon ry met die Land Rover, en kan jy glo daar rol ek die ding. Splinter nuwe Land Rover, die nachtpad, en vir my straf, word ek toe Land Rover sonder 'n dak, een van die ou groen Mambas gegee, om die rest van die oefening mee deur te maak. So onthou sulke incidente. Ek dink generaal Koos Bom sal ook lekker lag aan dit onthou. Ek onthou 'n ander ding van generaal Koos ook, om een of ander rede op 'n Vrydagmiddag het hy besluit, nou moet eers 'n paar triks gedoen word voordat ons kan huis toe gaan. En dit het gewoonlik strawwe oefening ingesluit, soos byvoorbeeld met die waterkarretjies of met die sleepwaens al om die vlieghawe hardloop. Of later het hy een op 'n slag ons 2 dae na mekaar 40 km laat stap. Altyd iets gehad vir 'n Vrydag, sodat ons nou basies moeg by die huis kan kom en nie ons vrouens pla nie. Dan 'n ander insident tydens die inoefening vir operasie Daisy, het ons 'n probleem gehad aan die stomkant en een van die 120 mm moture het so 150 meter voor die demonstrasiegroep geval. Nou dit was die vinnigste wat ek 'n klomp ouens van kampstoele af sien klim het in hulle hele lewe, en ons was gelukkig dat iemand nie daar seer gekry het nie. So dit is ook maar ietsie wat ou altyd onthou, van hoe vinnig 'n ou daar moes 'n plan maak om die situasie te beredder. Ek onthou baie goed die jong offisiere se formele etes. It was always fun. It had a dual purpose. One is to introduce them to the tradition of a formal meal, and secondly to show them that we're human beings, that we can also have a good party. I had a very embarrassing fall with my 500cc motorbike in the unit. I used to drive up and down in the unit with this thing, and then one day I took a corner too fast, and in front of the whole unit, busy getting ready for the parade, I fell off the bike. En dit was nogal 'n redelike gedoente om te sien, dat hier val die bevelvoerder. Maar nou ja, dit gebeur, né? Ek is baie trots om te sê, 3 maande nadat ek probeer herstel het van my 1985 skietwonde, wat ek tydens die hinderlaag opgedoen het, het ek 'n marathon gehardloop. Baie stadig, maar ek het hom voltooi. Ek sal dit altyd onthou, met ouens soos Duff de Villiers, wat my aangemoedig het. Ag, ek onthou die chipping competitions vir ons, wat ons gehad het in die veld, as deel van ons golfdag. I remember very well a guy that died the other day. His name is John Fourie. He put up R1 million for a hole-in-one during that competition. So it was fun. I remember it as of yesterday. I also remembered how proud I was to see that convoy driving out of the School of Artillery towards Army Battle School. Ons het nie oorgeverfde voertuie gehad, nuwe bande, silverskoon uitrusting en trotse mense. Dit was werklik 'n belewenis om daai konvooi dop te hou. En dan, ek het die voorreg gehad om vir 2 jaar onder luitenant-generaal Johnny Koetser te werk. Hy was die bevelhouder by Noordwes en sal nooit sy ondergroepe vergeet nie. Hy het ons soos 'n milie geëet. Maar dis die dinge wat ek so bietjie kan onthou daar, maar dan is daar ook kameraadskap. Dis bitter belangrik. Jy weet, toe ek destyds uit die hospitaal ontslaan is, toe kan ek nie loop nie. Dus ek op 'n rolstoel. En wie het my by die hek ontvang by my huis om my in die huis in te help? Koos Loubser. Dis kameraadskap. Hy was die bevelvoerder toe. Hy het my gehelp tot in die kamer. Ek sal dit nooit vergeet nie. Dan ons het 2 baie smart offisiere verloor. Ek kan nie die jaar onthou nie. Ek dink dit was hier in 1994 rond. Mark Brown en Willem van Reineveld was altyd luitenant-kolonelle wat in 'n motorongeluk gedood is. En dan sal ek ook onthou die hartseer wat ek gehad het die dag toe ek Ampere oorhandig het. Ek het dit nie gewys met die oorhandiging nie. Hy het by my oorgevat as bevelvoerder. Maar ek het gery tot op die brug, daar by die eenheid. Ek het my voertuig op die brug gestop. Ek het teruggekyk na die eenheid toe. Ek het so laaste saluut gedoen aan die eenheid en my berei gevat en hom oor die draad gegooi en in die kar geklim en huis toe gery. So dit was nogal 'n hartseer aangeleentheid. Baie van die dinge wat ek wil afsluit deur te sê, baie van die dinge wat ek geleer het in die ou SAW, het ek bykans net so toegepas in die buiteland tydens my aanstellings. Ek wil nogmaals baie dankie sê vir Koos en vir Perry vir hierdie geleentheid. Ek wil alle eer en dank aan die Hemelse Vader gee dat ek vandag hier kan sit. Ek het 'n paar keer noue dood ontsnappings gehad. En ek hoop ek het in kort vir julle my storie vertel. En as julle meer verwag het, vra ek om verskoning, maar ek het werklik te lank terug met dit te doen gekry. Maar baie dankie nogmaals.
Well, welcome here. You know, guys, we've been doing this for almost 5 years and we have millions of views, and more than $1 million for views. And we're really hurting our enemies because they don't like our message to come out, which is why we're so suppressed. So just a quick reminder, if you like the video, please think about it. Buy me a rooibos tea. But you actually click on it as buy me a coffee. It is quite standard right across YouTube and everywhere else.
We just added it. It's a new
It's a new
support, a new method of support, which
Yeah.
is greatly appreciated.
Yes, and it is still the same as we still have Patreon, of course, and we will still ask you to read my books and the books we wrote together because it's really, really good. This is Rebecca, by the way, if you don't know, it's my lovely wife. She's the driving force behind Legacy because there were times when I wanted to give up and there were lots of frustrations, especially with her.
Even in filling out the Buy Me a Coffee form.
Man, that's true. I've got a South African attitude against red tape. You know, you were standing in the queues where at television things, you do get angry quite quickly. I think I won't get it out of me. But guys, to be honest, it's not only me making these videos. Sometimes Fossey and the rest would also contribute. And if they don't contribute in making the video, Fossey especially is doing a lot of editing in the background. So we're going to put in also a specific link where another presenter was involved, where you buy him or her a coffee, and not me, because I think it's just the right thing to do.
We're starting out the test phase
Yeah.
now.
See if it works.
So you can buy us a coffee. There is a choice. You can select 1, 2, 3, or more coffees.
Yeah.
It's not coffee.
Or
We don't
rooibos tea.
see. We don't drink coffee. That's why, believe it or not, that's why rooibos tea is very appreciated.
Yeah, very much so, very much so. And then, yeah, of course, you know, I say this in the thank you message as well, but it is a bit psychological as well. If you keep on doing this, you keep on working, keep on spending a lot of money to do it. The trip to us in South Africa to record all the Air Force things has cost 100,000 rand easily. At some stage, you really feel abused, man. You really feel that you need to get something back, even if it's small. It's more about psychological, doing a good job.
And what I see is it motivates him to continue on and get new ideas. And he would like, like the trip, which is coming up, I think, or might, who knows when you see this, Bridge over River Kwai. He was so motivated to do that.
Yeah, we learned a lot, River Kwai. It's a fantastic video. Also include Hellfire Pass, but we also would like to go to Vietnam and look at Khe Sanh and Dien Bien Phu and where the Americans ran away. The CIA headquarters left their files behind. I'll mention that. But even here in Thailand, in Bangkok, we go to Bangkok, we fly to Bangkok, we can spend a day or two and record the Air Force Museum or the other museums that are there. It's history, man. We need support to do it. It's not fair that we carry the burden all by ourselves. I'm not really willing to do that anymore. People can enjoy the videos. If you can assist us, buy us a coffee, man. What does coffee cost? Or rooibos tea? Nothing. Just contribute something and we can keep us going and hurt our enemies even more.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Looking very American right now.
You do?
Yeah, because American girls always wear hats because their hair always looks bad. Like, you don't have to worry about your hair.
Okay. Well, I found that very fascinating. Thank you, sir. We really appreciate hearing about the old days. It's important to me that people actually do remember what happened and what type of people we were. I do say this in many of the videos, but it was General Bowman of Special Forces who said to me that ons was nie hier jy mense nie. I don't even know how to translate that, but I'll tell you that come down that you were not scumbags. I think that in the old army, that even the new one, I would say, is decent people serving, and we should never forget that. But I really would like to know, sir, what are you looking for in an artilleryman? What makes you, what type of recruit do you want? Does he need to be good at maths and perhaps physical as well? What do you want from him?
I think it is important that the recruit has a very good knowledge of mathematics. You cannot do, or you find it extremely difficult to do the predictions to fire the artillery pieces if you do not understand mathematics. I think that's one of the first requirements. Secondly, you know, if you have to move around artillery projectiles, which is 49 kilograms, if I remember correct, you need a specific physical presence. And I will always remember, I'm sure you remember the name Marius Hurter, who became a Springbok prop. He was the only guy ever that I saw picking up a 155 millimeter projectile, taking it at the top and just lifting it up. I've never seen that before that or after that. So yes, you must have some physical presence. Thirdly, I believe you must have integrity. You know, integrity is the backbone of any soldier. I will never forget what General Constant Viljoen once told me. He said, I'm walking the straight line. Nie 'n bietjie links en 'n bietjie regs nie. Not a little bit right or a little bit left. Things are either right or I don't deal with this. So I think integrity is important. And honesty. Your honesty is very close to integrity. But, you know, if you make mistakes, admit it. If you make mistakes while you're firing artillery rounds, you can kill your own people. That is why you need to be honest. If you're busy with training, you make a mistake, learn from your mistake. I'm also a believer that if you're a good sportsman, you're a good soldier. And I believe that, you know, when I was younger and I select the lieutenants and the bombardiers who stayed behind at the School of Artillery, most of them had some sport experience or some performed very good sport. So I think this trend. I think that's about what I would say for a young guy if you select him.
I think it was General Eisenhower who said, if you don't walk in the middle of a road, you walk in a gutter. So it's fascinating dat Generaal Viljoen dieselfde gesê het. En natuurlijk, Generaal Viljoen was 'n gunner.
Ja, hy was, ja.
Maar as ek reg kom dit nou die taal so te meng, kolonel, is dit nie beter om te sê hy was 'n artillerist nie? Wat is die regte manier om iemand te noem? Of julle self, wat noem ons julle? Gunners?
Ja, ons is artilleriste. Ons is gunners in Engels, ons is artilleriste. En soos jy weet, en ek sê dit met 'n glimlag, ons staan regs voor in die senior posisie in enige parade. So die artilleriekorps is die senior korps ook van die leer. Ja, ons is artilleriste en ek is baie trots om een te gewees het.
Weet jy dalk hoekom jy daai blou berei het? Hoe kom daai kleur?
Ek is nie seker nie. Maar ek glo dus dat dit maar deur die jare gekom van die vroeëre jare af. Ons is nie die enigste met die blou berei nie. Jy weet, die genie het dieselfde berei, maar hulle het 'n ander kenteken natuurlik. So ek is nie seker koers waar dit vandaan kom nie. Maar ons nog met trots gedra.
Jy weet, ek het op 'n stadium gepraat met 'n panseroffisier wat nou heeltemal 'n nasie op hulle eie is. En ek sê dit met liefde en respek natuurlik. En hulle het wel altyd gesê, hulle was nie goed in rugby, hulle het 'n goeie rugby span gehad daar in Tempe, omdat hulle met, weer eens met die batterye van die tanks en die goed kon speel. So wil nou hier vra, sê julle nou met die artillerie, ek kan nou die woord sel in Afrikaans kom nie, wat noem mense dit? Projektiele kan optel. Daai ding is groot, mense. As jy hom nog nooit gesien het nie, gaan na 'n museum iewers, jy sal hom sien. Dis 'n fris ding daai. Hoe goed was julle rugby spanne werklik teen, sê net maar die Pirates wat dink hulle wen alles in die lewe? En ek sê dit ook met liefde, want ek weet hierdie kursus gedoen.
Ja, ons die eenheidse span het alle jare wat ek daar was, en selfs in die jare wat ek 'n student was. En daai tyd het ek die voorreg gehad om die kaptein van die span ook te wees. Ons het elke jaar die trofee gewen. So ons het baie goeie spelers gehad. In 1979 het 6 van daardie artillerie skool eenheid lede vir Wes-Transvaal gespeel. En van daardie lede het ook Springbokke geword daarna. So ja, ons het altyd goeie rugby spanne gehad, en in 1996 was ek die voorsitter van die Noordwes-Kommeramense span, en daar was ten minste 30-40% van daardie spelers was artilleriste. En daai span het oor see gaan toer. Ons het gaan toer, generaal Johnny Koetser was saam, en ons het teen 2 spanne in Engeland gespeel en 2 spanne in Wallis, en ons het net verloor teen die Britse leerspan. En daai Britse leerspan het 4 ouens gehad wat vir die Britse Leeu's gespeel het, en ons het net teen hulle verloor. So ons het goeie rugby spelers gehad. Maar terug te kom na die projektiele toe, dis alright om 1 of 2 op of af te laai van 'n kanontrekker af. But the moment you start to prepare for a fire plan, and you need to load off 20, 30, 40 of those projectiles, you need to have the strength to do that. It's not easy.
Ek kan nie help om te wonder waar die naam klipdrif vandaan kom nie, want daar is seker ouens hier wat nie sal verstaan wat 'n bolleklippies is nie. Maar dit is wel altyd nogal interessant geweest dat jy nou daai naam het in die artillerieskool. Was dit maar altyd daar of het iemand dit gedoop en die naam?
Klipdrif is die area op die kaart. As jy gaan kyk na jou gewone landskaart of dorpskaarte, streekskaarte, klipdrif is daar die area. Nou ja, voor ons Koos was die mediese opleidingseenheid daar, en hulle was maar bekend as Klipdrif mediese opleidingseenheid, en ons is eintlik die artillerieskool te Klipdrif, nie Klipdrif artillerieskool nie. So ja, dis die area, strek nogal redelik wyd, en ons het ook legendes gehad wat daar gebly het, nie ver van ons hek af nie, het oom Jan Wilkins gebly, die wêreldberoemde stoeier, en hy is nou die dag oorlede, aan die ouderdom van in die 80. So yes, it's more the name that relates to the area.
Ja, dit is nou jammer om te hoor van oom Jan, ek nie dit geweet nie, my diepe simpatie. Man, ek onthou hom met 'n volstryskop. Hy het wel 'n sterk man gewees, 'n vreeslike sterk oom daai. As julle nie weet waarvan ek praat nie, mense, van soek dit op Google, dit was 'n rofstoeier, maar regtig 'n opgevoede man. Ek wil nie nou terugvat baie ver, jy weet waar hy die sabel gewen het as die beste student as 'n kandidaat-offisier. Daai sabel, behou 'n mens die dink, daai swaard, word dit jou eiendom of moet jy hom teruggee?
Nee, jy behou hom. Die sabel het aan die bokant, net onder die handvatsel op die silwer gedeelte van, as ek dit die swart gedeelte kan noem, is die embleem van Suid-Afrika ingegrafeer. En daai sabel met sy skede hou jy. Ek het daai sabel met sy skede vir my kleinseun geskenk, want oupa het nou, wat gaan ek met hom doen in elk geval, ek kan hom mos nie saamvat hemel toe nie. So ek het daai sabel vir hom gegee, en baie trots gewees daai dag, veral omdat aan die Betsy vir ons daai ding oorhandig het.
Nou gaan ek jy nou 'n dom vraag vra en julle artilleriste kan hom af my lag, maar wat is 'n VOO?
'n Voorste observasieoffisier. Dit is iemand wat stap voor saam met die magte, terwyl die magte die aanval doen, is ou dan nou heel voor, en jy verstel dan die artillerievuur op die vyand wat ons besig is om aan te val of aan te mars na toe. So dis forward observation officer, en voorste observasieoffisier. En daardie spesifieke insidentpoos waarna ek verwys het, die ou wat in die lug was, wat die lugwaarnemer is, 'n verkeerde korreksie gegee, ongelukkig gebeur dit, en daar is toe, ek kry onthou 4 of 5 van 3-2 Balions se mense gedood. Daardie 140 mm het plus minus 80 meter van my afgeval, en so is weer eens genade dat ek vandag hier sit, en ek sal nooit vergeet nie, ek het eergister met Eddie Viljoen gepraat, en ek en hy onthou dit nog tot vandag toe.
Ja, ek is dankbaar om te sê, ons maak dalk 'n video kry van onderhoud wat generaal Eddie Viljoen so 'n week of 3 terug gedoen het daar by Buffalo basis, en wel waar die basis was. Ons praat nog met die manne, sal baie dankbaar wees. Kan ek vir julle 3 verskillende terme gee wat ek dink het te doen met die artillerie, as jy net vir my miskien kan verduidelik wat dit is? En ek gaan dit nou in Engels doen, want ek ken dit nie in Afrikaans nie. So, Colonel, can you tell me what's meant when I talk about direct fire, indirect fire, and air burst?
Direct fire is a term that normally used by the armor group. That is where they have a target in front of them. They aim the tank to hit the target, and they fire directly at the target and hit the target directly. Now, the artillery can also do direct fire. If we're in that position, we're in big trouble. But we are able to lower the barrels and do direct fire, but that's not our forte. Indirect fire is exactly the opposite. Indirect means that the gun or the gunners or the rocket launchers can't see the enemy themselves, and they fire from distances up to 50, 60 kilometers away, and that's why we call it indirect fire. What was the third one, Chris?
Airburst.
Oh, airburst. Yeah, airburst is just a term used for the ammunition. You set the fuse that it bursts normally about 10 meters above the ground, and then it disperses the shrapnel. So it's just a term to say that the projectile will not detonate on impact, but it will explode about 10 meters above the ground. That is airburst.
Yeah, I just want to tell you people, if you want to know about rocket firing, the MLRS, those things, just go and listen to what Colonel Pierre Franklin had to say in his episode. I'll put a link in for you here. He covered that quite well. Did you ever feel that you're being outgunned by the enemy, sir?
Never. Never. Well, there's many reasons for it. One is our ranges that we could fire is much, much better than theirs. I mean, the G5, in my days, you can, 52 kilometers easily. So it's way more than any of the enemy ranges, which provides you with the opportunity to deploy outside their range. So even if you fire at them and they want to do counter bombardment, they can't reach you. And secondly, our training is just superb against them. Our soldiers that went into the wars that you know from early 70s all the way till end of 87, 88, those soldiers came to the army as kids, young boys, and left as men. The training was good, and that is also one of the reasons why I think the enemy just could never compete actually with us. So that's the two main reasons why I think I was never in the situation where we were really in trouble with enemy indirect fire, except once, that was after I was shot in the ambush in 1985, while we were crawling away to get some help and out of the ambush area. They started with indirect fire. And then I was on the receiving end, but that was me and Leon as individuals. That was not an artillery unit. Yeah, so I'm very proud to say that I was never. I don't know about an incident where they outgunned us or performed better than us.
I think it's the Rhodesian army who started talking about saying they were revved or they were revving someone, meaning they were shooting at somebody. Mainly, as I understand it, by mortars. Now, did the South African army use the same type of terminology, or how would you say if you were shooting at somebody with your artillery?
No, we call it an engagement. It's an engagement either with a mortar or with an artillery gun or with a rockets, like the multiple rocket launcher. So we call it an engagement. You must remember the Rhodesian army had a lot of funny names. They gave certain operations and certain weaponry. So we talk about an engagement. It's an artillery engagement on the enemy.
You mentioned here that you were at Katima Mulilo. Now, Katima Mulilo is a place close to my heart because I was at school there in 1976 to 78, which should say something. And I know we had the Dominee here. He spoke about that attack of the enemy onto Katima, where I believe 10 servicemen died. Sadly so, they were on their way home. In fact, they would have left the very next day. And when the attack came in, and I do recall, I think it was 25 pounders shooting back. The army was not wasting time to shoot back. They were hammering back. A question I want to ask you, sir, is that how do you set up your counter battery fires? Can you shoot from a map where you think they might be, or do you have the input from where they're shooting, or how does that work? How does your fire plan evolve?
Okay, let's start at the beginning. Firstly, you need to do an appreciation on the enemy in terms of the composition. Secondly, the type of weaponry they have. Of course, we focus on the artillery weapons they have. Then you gain some information on where they normally deploy or where they move around. And then you use a map. And what you do, you develop a fire plan where you select, in Katima's case, you select maybe road crossings, you maybe water points where they should stop to get some water, possible areas to assembly for an attack, and you plot these possible targets on a map and you number them. For example, if you have a battery, and we call it Papa, it's just a Papa battery, the senior battery, you can call the target Papa 1001, and the next one is Papa 1002. Then that map is then presented to that plan, that fire plan is then presented to the higher echelons, and if it's approved, you prepare your fire plan, the rest of the fire plan. And that includes the type of ammunition you're going to use, how many rounds you're going to use, and then when it's necessary, you react. And that's the counter-bombardment. And in that specific incident, I was not there. But the reason why the 140 millimeter guns could reply immediately was because of the reason that they had predetermined fire plan. And that's in short how we do it.
Dis fascinerend hierdie goed vir my. Jy weet, dit was Veldmaarskal Montgomery wat die hele tyd gesê het, hy kort 'n ordentlike artilleris om sy veldslae te beplan van 'n artilleriehoogpunt. Hy het die ouens baie hoog aangeslaan. Nou, as hulle onmiddellik kan terugskiet soos jy nou sê, dan beteken dit vir my, hulle moet hulle ladings en hulle projektiel daar naby daai kanon hê. Hy moet daar iewers wees. Hoe werk die logistiek op dit? Het jy 'n bunker daar naby jou met nog van hulle, sal ouens hardloop en nog bring, of het jy genoeg daar by jou en die risiko vat as daar 'n vyandelik projectiel by jou val, dan glyf jy almal opblaas. Hoe werk jy daai goed uit?
Katiema Mlilo was ammunisiebankers. So wat gebeur, jou ammunisie en jou ladings is in die bankers in die dag en in die nag. Wanneer jy 'n waarskuwingsorder kry, vuurplan, daar's 'n spesifieke order wat jy kry wat sê waarskuwingsorder vuurplan, dan word daardie ammunisie wat in die waarskuwingsorder gegee word, uitgedra en by die kanon neergesit, sodat dit 'n direkte laaiproses kan wees. As dit reën, dan gooi ons hom gewoonlik met 'n seiltjie of 'n ding toe, maar jy moet onthou dit is ook in toehouers die ladings, dis dan nou nie in die oop nie. Tydens die groot operasies is daar die banker, was nie eintlik 'n banker nie, dit was die kanontrekker. Ons het die ammunisie op kanontrekkers gehad as die eerste lyn en die tweede lyn op die samelhonders wat dan in 'n echelongebied gestaan het. So om terug te kom Katima toe, wanneer daai waarskuwingsorder gegee word, dan sal die bediening, die kanonbediening soos ons hom noem, the crew, they will go and they will pick the ammunition and the charges as been spelled out in the warning order, and then they just wait for the command to load and fire. That's how it works in short.
What type of ammo can you shoot then? Can you shoot like say shrapnel and high explosives or even tactical nuclear?
No, we don't have a huge variety, but you have the high explosives, which is the brisant, soos ons hom in Afrikaans noem. And then you have the white phosphor, or die wit fosfor, wat bo die grond bars en dan die fosfor versprei. Then you have smoke, what mostly used for target indication, etc., or for many times used for the air OP, so that you can see where the smoke goes and then see if you can find the enemy in relation to where the smoke exploded. And then you have the illumination, dus die ligfakkel wat dan die teikengebied verlig, het sy vir jouself, dat jy kan sien waar jy gaan, of het sy vir die waarnemer, om 'n beter sig te kan hê in die nag op die teiken. So dis die tipe ammunisie wat ons het in die artilleriekorps. Ek weet nie of daar intussen tyd nuus gekom het nie, jy praat nou van 30 jaar terug, maar dis die wat ons mee groot geword het.
Jy het die infanterisopleiding gedoen. Ons is geleer dat as daar geskiet word met die ligfakkels, die flares, terwyl daai ding hang daar in die lug, staan jy doodstil, jy beweeg nie. Al is jy in die hoogte, jy moet nie platval of begin wegkruip of iets nie, bly net, staan net stil. Hoe was die opleiding of ervaring met dit?
Ja, ek het tuinopleiding gedoen 6 maande in infanterieskool as jong offisier wat dan nou stedelike tuin en nie stedelike tuin ingesluit het. Ek moet eerlikwaar wees, ek kan nou nie daai detail onthou nie, maar as dit so is, dan is dit sekerlik so. Die artillerie het nou nie daai probleem nie. Daai fakkel van ons is natuurlik 1000 maal meer sterk as die gewone lugvakkel wat ons ken in die infanterie. En ons word maar hoofsaaklik gebruik om die grondmagte te kan sien waar om aan te val en waar die vyand hulle bevind. Dis omtrent hoe ek dit kan antwoord vir jou, Koos.
Nou is dankbaar oor daai antwoord. Mense, as jy van julle dalk iets weet hiervan, kom vertel ons asseblief, ons welkom by Regterop. Ek weet in Vietnam het die Amerikaners nou geglo in iets wat hulle genoem het 'n firebase. En wat hulle gemaak het daar is hulle sal 'n vuurplan, is dit die woord van fireplan, uitwerk. En dan in die aand begin hulle skiet boop om, want hulle het 'n no-go zone, waar jy nie meer 'n killing zone, waar jy nie mag beweeg. Nou, het ons ooit in Suid-Afrika so iets gedoen. Ek weet hulle het iets soos 2 biljoen, en ek bedoel die woord D, nie met 'n M nie. Iets soos 2 biljoen pot. Dis albediesie so uitgeskiet daarso, dis die statistieke wat by uitgekom het. Het Suid-Afrika dieselfde tipe manier gehad van dinge doen?
Ek dink nie so nie. Ek dink ek sien Afrikaanse woord wat ek sou gebruik is spekulatiewe vuur. Ek het dit heeltemal gedoen. En as ek die jaar reg onthou, was dit in 1981 op die einde met 120 mm mortiere, waar ons dieselfde gedoen het wat ek jou gesê is op Katima. Ons het sekere areas geïdentifiseer waar die vyand sal of water drink of deur sou gaan. En ons het 'n klomp keer in die nag op daardie gebiede gevuur. Maar daar's 'n risiko. En dit is dat jy weet nie of daar plaaslike bevolking is wat gaan water drink nie. En dan kan jy onskuldige mense dood. Ons het nie daai beginsel baie toegepas nie. In elk geval nie operasies wat ek van betrokke was nie. Maar ons het baie in die nag geskiet op vooraf berekende vuurplanne. En dis 'n verskil. So ons het om seker gemaak dat ons weet waar het hulle oornag, waar is hulle hawegebiede ensovoorts, en dan het ons hulle gepeper in die nag, moet geen fout maak nie. Maar net wild en wakker te skiet, nie wat ek van weet nie.
Wanneer so 'n kanonne skiet, is daar in die aand, ek neem aan daar's 'n lang vlam of 'n ding wat uitkom daar by die loop.
Yes, for sure. Yes, the reason I'm moving closer to the screen now and then is because I've got an artillery ear. It's not as good as it used to be. I'm supposed to put in my little devices, but I forgot actually this morning. Yes, and one of the reasons I'm wearing glasses, I was stupid enough to stand very close to a 120 mm mortar being fired, and the flash of the explosion or the mortar firing nearly blinded me. And you should not look at the barrel of a gun if it's firing. At night, of course, it makes the flash, and that's one of the things that you must always be aware of, because if you can see it, the enemy observers can also see it from a distance. It's not good. And when we were young, we were tough. You remember? You didn't put the earmarks on the heads and just open the mouth like this. You open it up and you just stand there. Yeah, it's not good to look at the flash.
I have a second last question for you, sir. You remember the time when you fell off your bike with 500 scrambler where at the parade ground? Now my question would be, sir, that the rank start laughing at you, or were they very concerned? Laughed after you?
I think they laughed innerly, but they never laughed openly, because they know what will happen if they do that. No, I think I wasn't, I deserved to be laughed at. I just was stupid. I was taking a turn on gravel too fast. And I carried the blisters for quite some time. So yes, I think some of them laughed silently.
Ek wil nie vra hier teen die einde, hierdie maatskappy wat jy gestig het. En dit is baie belangrik vir my mense, want aan die einde van die dag, jou veiligheid is redelik in jou eie hande, want polisie kan nie oral wees nie. Dit het ek gesê in my eie tyd in die SAP is, ons kan nie oral wees nie, jy moet daar 'n bietjie verantwoordelikheid vat vir jouself. Hoe werk hierdie maatskappy van u met risikobestuur? As ou nou dink byvoorbeeld, miskien is die oom op 'n plaas of ma en pa's iewers. Werk julle 'n plan uit om te help om te kyk mense, miskien moet jy ietsie hier doen, miskien ietsie daar doen en miskien paraat raak. Kan jy my vertel?
Ja, die maatskappy is in 1998 gestig. Hy het toe 'n ander naam gehad. Sy naam was USC. Wat gestaan het vir Ubique Strategic Consultants, baie interessante. Ubique is 'n artillery naam. And what happened then, we formed this company and we focused on those days on training. We were fortunate to do some training at some of the Armed Corps affiliates, and we also focused on training need analysis. And we did the training need analysis for the Naspers group. So when I accepted the job as the commander of the Philippi Municipal Police College in the Cape, which I didn't mention in my CV, it sort of went into a silent period. And but my colleague Peter Botha, the company received the contract to present the training to the Municipal Police College. Then after that, we actually started really managing risks. The risk assessment is what we do in practical is the client will call us and say he's got a security or a safety problem. We then go and meet the client and define his needs, and we prepare a proposal for a risk assessment. At the risk assessment, we follow the standard ISO risk assessment processes, but we change it a little bit to fit our needs. We complete it, and then we present to the client a plan how we should mitigate or try to mitigate the risks. And this is where the crux is. That process, I'm not going to go into the detail, but we're still doing it now for some clients. As a matter of fact, I'm busy with an external one in the Middle East now. So yes, we're doing that. And to come back to your question about the farms, I never was involved directly in the farm plans, but in 2000, now I must remember, in 2018, I developed a plan for the Overberg district. That is now a very large district in the Western Cape. And the plan I developed was a contingency plan for farm attacks. And I developed it for the police. Unfortunately, the police could not do that. And Brigadier Heilbron, who was the regional commander, asked me, and I facilitated that. And we developed a plan for the police and the neighborhood watches and all the other safety organizations, private security companies, etc. So it is an interesting field that we worked in and still working in. But I must be honest, I'm more on the retirement mode now. And I just give a little bit of advice if they require advice.
Some time ago, we broadcast an episode on Lionel Reed. He wrote a book called The Meek Diaries. Great book. He actually went out and he spoke to the Meek pilots during the war in Angola. These Meek pilots were, of course, trying to bomb the hell out of the South African artillery and wherever else they could find. Do you have any experience with them trying to hunt you down? For those of you who is asking now, where were the South African Air Force? Well, they tried their best, but at that stage, they were fairly outclassed distance, field range. That was the biggest problem. But we'll make an episode of that as well. Did you find the Meeks intrusive, sir?
Yes, I will give you a good one of the experiences I had. 1985, before I was shot to pieces in the ambush, we were supporting the UNITA forces And we had 3 artillery batteries there, one with 120mm South African mortars and 2 with Russian mortars. And one morning, we were just finished with our engagement. Myself looked at Leon Philipson and he looked at me and I said, that noise is a chopper noise and there should not be a chopper nearby. And the next moment, the Hind chopper with his Gatling guns were on top of us. And the joke that I want to tell you is we were a bit lazy and we only dug 1 foxhole, not 2. Now, Leon is 6'4", nearly 6'5", and I'm 6'1", and both of us is not the smallest guys around. And both of us tried to jump into this foxhole at the same time. And that was quite fun. But yes, that Hind did some damage to the mortars. Luckily for us, I think he was a little bit out of ammunition. That was the one experience. And then, of course, there was some bombs that landing on the artillery sites during the 85, 86, 87, 88 campaign. And one of them landed very, very close to the artillery site and thanks God didn't explode. So yes, there were a few incidents that we were under attack, but it's very few and far apart.
I will remind you people listening here that we had Colonel Neil Ellis, also in Horus Crux holder. We have an episode where he speaks about the Russian Hind, which is standing there at Swartkops Museum, Air Force Museum. If people are interested in that beast of a thing, it's a really scary helicopter and it's very scary to be on the wrong side of it. Kolonel, baie dankie. Ek weet jy moet ander verpligtinge nakom nou met die kerk en so. En ons wil jy nie weghou daarvan nie. Ek bedank jy vir die tyd en die moeite wat jy het om hier met ons te gepraat het. Vreeslik interessant gewees. Manne, as daar ander artilleriste is wat hier is, luister en miskien julle wil praat met ons, kontak my net, is werklik waar nie 'n probleem nie, ons sê daar akkommodeer. En kolonel, is daar enige boodskap wat jy aan die artillerist vriende het wat miskien hier sal kyk?
Ja, ek wil net dankie sê vir my seniors wat my geleer het, wat my in staat gestel het om hopelik 'n goeie artillerist te wees. Ek wil dankie sê aan my kollegas wat altyd daar was wanneer ons mekaar moes help en bystaan in omstandighede. En ek wil baie dankie sê vir al my ondergeskiktes tot en met die troepe wat sonder hulle so ek in elk geval nooit 'n sukses behaal het nie. So ek wil net baie dankie daarvoor sê en dan wil ek afsluit deur te sê, dit is vir my belangrik om te sê dat dit wat ek bereik het in die lewe is uit die genade van die Here en ek dank die Hemelse Vader daarvoor. Anders sou ek nie vandag hier gesit het nie, ek moes 2 keer nie hier gewees het nie en ek is hier. En ek het net een fout gemaak in die aanbieding en dit tref my nou soos 'n bom. Dis nie noordoos van Zangongo wat ek geskiet is nie, maar in die Kazombo bog in die noordooste van Angola, so ek sal hom op die slide regmaak voor ek die slide vir jou stuur. Maar baie dankie Koos vir julle moeite. Die artillery vraag wat jy my gevra het was meer moeilik om te antwoord as die ander, omdat jy weet 30 jaar is 30 jaar. Maar dit is 'n besondere voorreg om by jou te gesels en baie sterkte ook met jou dinge waarmee jy besig is daar in Thailand.
Baie dankie kolonel. En soos ek altyd vir julle ouens sê, manne, tot ons weer nog ontmoet, mag die Here julle seën.
Baie dankie. Goed gaan.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.